So good evening, Orithro. We'll be starting with the third and the fourth session today. In the previous class, we had this. Good evening, sir. So in the previous class, we had discussed regarding the ways of thinking. I'll just share that PPT for a minute. We'll just recap, and then we'll continue with today's discussion. All right. Just give me a moment. So we had discussed in the previous class regarding ways of thinking. First one being positivist, which is not questioning the status quo. The second is the critical thought, where we actually question the status quo and we look at the political economy. At the base of all politics, we try to find the economic reasons for what something is happening. Then there is social constructivism, which means that the truth is not something out there like the positivist would think and it has to be found out. It is actually truth that is constructed through ideas. Ideas that are constructed are things like gender, money, race, countries. These are all imagined ideas. And then, of course, we've talked of the postmodernist thought, which talks about the state of existence, right? The existential crisis within the ideology of economy, political power, etc. And from there, we started to look at vision, mission, objective, plan, strategy, tactics, etc. We also revised a little bit on post-corp planning, organizing, staffing, directing, budgeting, etc. And how these ideas uh, play a part across departments such as marketing, advertising, finance, technology, operations, and production, right? We looked at some of the reasons of corporate failure. I will revisit that this part once we, go ahead with today's discussion, which is on um, leadership, right? So we discussed a lot of reasons for failure, and within that, how Kodak failed as a business, right? We discussed this one case study. Today, we look at Tata Nano as one of the failures of the Tata Group, and also one success story coming from the Tata Group, the same group, right? And we look at some other reasons for failures of business because your first few sessions, according to the syllabus, deal with business failure. So we're looking at these. All right. So in today's discussion, we look at leadership styles, right? You might have studied this earlier somewhere. Uh, it, this might be a bit of revisiting for you. And you can pitch in wherever you want to say something. You're most welcome to add uh, wherever you want to. Or if you don't understand something, you can stop me as well. So we look at the three main types of leadership styles, and there are others that emanate from that, right? So we look at the first one as being autocratic or authoritarian, the second as democratic or participatory, and third main as delegative or laissez-faire. Apart from that, there are other leadership styles such as charismatic. Charismatic leadership is something that was explained by Max Weber when he was talking about bureaucracy. And the fifth one, which now we talk of, and it emanates from participatory and delegative, which is facilitating type leader. Okay. So first we look at autocratic or authoritarian leader. Here, mostly the characteristics would be they are given the power to make decisions alone. They have control over and authority, and they closely supervise and control people when they perform certain tasks, right? So these are examples would be very dictatorial kind of leaders. Even example of Hitler are given here, even though I don't think he should be considered as one of the good leaders, but some people, a lot of my students to begin with, they start by saying that, oh, we love Hitler. I don't know why. And those students, I monitor them very closely, and I think they need me the most usually. So this is where you can.
Ma'am, actually, this autocratic or authoritarian leader. So, when I see the description, it says the power to make decision alone and having total authority. So, this itself is against the leadership quality, right?
Yes, but mostly this happens in companies which are, I agree with what you're saying, but it happens in companies which are very centralized, or where these are smaller organizations where uh, centralized leadership or only one leader takes all the decisions. Also, in today's world, this has become more of an ideal type. Ideal type is a philosophy or a concept given by Max Weber again, where he says that an ideal type is a prototype against which you can compare something else. So we can, use this label in two ways. One, to understand how smaller organizations and centralized organizations work. Second, we can compare other types of leaderships with this worst kind of leadership style, right? Having said that, there may not be per se autocratic leaders or systems may not allow you to be like that. Yet, pathologically, certain people are autocratic by nature or authoritarian by nature. So they may not be overall authoritarian or autocratic because the systems of the organization, but given a chance, they act like that, right? So one must know when a particular leader is acting autocratic or authoritarian and when they are allowing you to be participatory. Right? So for these reasons, we do discuss autocratic and authoritarian. Yes, I agree that if you're this, you're not even a leader. It's against
Yeah,
the very nature of.
like sorry for asking this, but I
No,
thought
no,
like
perfect.
I thought of
Perfect.
just clarifying.
No, no, no. That's most welcome. You must ask these questions. In fact, it would just help me to elaborate, in the direction in which I should, according to um, and a lot of students, they don't ask questions, so we don't know how much they would know or expect us to talk about. So you're most welcome. Please comment in between. Please give feedback. Ask questions. This is a discussion. Okay. And if you still don't agree, it's okay. You can still bring your points. We can discuss it
No,
further.
no, no, it's okay.
All right. So the next is democratic or participative leader. Now, democratic, in a very Indian democratic way of understanding democracy would be something where people are allowed to choose who the leader should be, right? They are the ones who work for people, right? Now, if we extend this definition a little bit and we borrow from what we call as developmental studies, there we discuss something known as participation and community formation. Right? So a democratic or a participative leader would allow for discussion to happen and they would approach any problem or any business situation uh, by asking people, their team, this is the solution, this is the problem at hand. What do you think should be the solution? Right? They usually let people discuss and then they come up with, through brainstorming, they come up with a solution. Right? So, in participatory style of communication and discussion, usually we say that we go into the field like an inquirer, right? You want to inquire and co-create the truth or co-create a reality, right? So, in this case, also a democratic or a participative leader allows that to happen. I'll give you an example from one of the participative activities I used to do when I was heading a radio station called My FM. It belongs to the Dainik Bhaskar group. I was heading their Jalandhar station. So as a station head, I had a couple of departments with me. So I was the overall head of this one. Like we had to create a profit center out of it. So to create a profit center, we had to look at the inflow of revenue and manage the expenditure. The expenditures were on things like buying music rights. That was my biggest expenditure. So I had to pay to T Series and Yash Raj Music and so many other music labels. That is our biggest expenditure. Apart from that, another big expenditure is that you bought airwaves. You bought a frequency, right? 94.3 is the frequency you bought from the Information and Broadcasting Ministry. They sell you this for 10 years. This one frequency, you own it for 10 years. In 10 years, you need to write off the 10 crores that you've paid for license fee, right? So effectively what this means is that I need to cover the cost of writing off, right? I need to break it down into per month basis, and I need to cover music cost. Along with that, working expenditure such as salaries and electricity and things like that. So we used to make, of course, we had an annual budget. We also used to make a monthly budget. Right? So the monthly budget, usually one draft I used to prepare. I do not believe that a participatory leader should just go empty-handed into the meeting. You must assess the situation. So I would know what the pain points are, right? So let's say there is a lag in targets from the previous month. So I'm going to carry it forward this month. Or if I have exceeded the target of next month, I can reduce that much from this month. So I go with that assessment into a meeting. Usually the first meeting used to happen with the sales team. Sales team are the ones who get advertising revenue into any media organization, right? So they used to sell time slots of advertising. So the first meeting used to be with the sales team, asking them, where do you think you can generate this kind of revenue from? For this month, we need to earn 1 crore from the market. How will we do this? In that, they would tell me, everyone would tell me how they would go about, and we would make a plan. And then they would tell me, we need your help and we need you to give us a sanction of this 5% extra discount so that I can buy this extra time from this particular advertiser, right? So you say, yes, I will do it. I will take permission from my heads and I will pass on that information. That's one. Second most participative activity that we used to do, and I feel it was participative, is that there are the biggest team on the radio station, apart from the sales team, is radio jockeys and the content creation team, the creative team. Now, this creative team, the next meeting is to happen with them. It's important for them to understand that they are not just celebrities on air. People love them, they're RJs. They also need to understand that their salaries are paid from the revenues that we earn. And they need to be mindful of this activity as not just entertainment, but also as an activity which translates into business. So even they need to be mindful of, just like the sales team, every day they make a plan to go and visit clients. The creative team also should create a daily plan of what copy they'll write. Copy, which is the ad copy or the spoken word on radio. What are they going to be mentioning, etc. Some RJs were averse to the idea of saying that this time check is brought to you by XYZ advertisers. They are not okay with it. They think they are very big celebrities. So they had to be tackled. Then they had to be told that this is the 30-day month. Divide every day to make it a special day. So you could have the birthday of Kishore Kumar, a Rose Day, a Valentine's Day, birthday of Mahatma Gandhi, and mental health day. And every day should have a theme. That day should commensurate with what the sales team is doing, should coincide. They should be able to get that kind of ad revenue, right? So now you had one meeting with the sales team, second meeting with the content team, and there were so many of them that otherwise people would think of them as big celebrities. But when we sat in meetings, they would even sit on the floor and discuss. They were so comfortable because they were heard. They thought that their ideas were being implemented. So it becomes very organic and very participatory, because here I'm not coming with a up down approach that this is what we need to achieve, this is what you have to do it, even though I have that agenda. But I would face it practically by saying that we need to earn this kind of revenue, and this is the calendar of the month. What are your ideas? Right? So they would tell me if that's possible or not and how it's possible. Right? So this is a very practical first-hand experience that I have had of a participatory way of leading a team. And we led to success within 2-3 months. Now, when I had joined the Jalandhar station which I was heading, it was a sick station. They were in losses. So within 2-3 months, we covered the losses of the previous year. And by the year end, we had a 150% growth over the past year. So this they made into a case study for other stations, and they started studying. We used to get guests from other stations to study our. It's a small station. People used to come and study our station from other states, etc. So I feel, and just like you were saying, that the bang opposite of authoritative, I think, would be participative, because it's a very matured way of handling a team. It's giving voice to people, and once they think that they're being heard, they get a sense of belongingness, and uh, they become much more motivated to participate towards profit generation for your organization. If they have a problem, they feel it's easy to come up to you, right? So this style per se, I think, goes very well with today's times, and it should be followed. Uh, Rather than any other style, I think this works the best. But then there is also the delegative style or the laissez-faire style. The word laissez-faire means leave us alone. And here it's being used in a context. Please give me a moment. Sorry about that. So laissez-faire, the word itself means leave us alone. And in this context, it's been used for a delegative leader who thinks that the team should be left to fend for itself and let the market forces determine what decision would be the best decision. Okay. So a delegative leader, I mean, this is kind of a confusing name, but let's focus on laissez-faire, is a leader who does give targets, who does give, uh, how do you say, who does tell the team what to do, but it allows the team a lot of freedom, because this leader will have a lot of faith in the team. Now, having said this, I feel that with some of your team members, you can be laissez-faire. Why? Because they're very senior, you trust them, and also they've become kind of leaders in their own right. But you can't have a laissez-faire with everyone. So even if you're participatory, you have a certain amount of governance. over your team, where you keep telling them whether they are on track or not, right? Another big advantage that that participatory has over laissez-faire is that when a participatory leader goes into the meeting, they would usually take to the board and say, okay, what is your suggestion? You note down all the suggestions as a brainstorming, and the team has arrived at a decision. And because the team has arrived at a decision, they need to own it. They should not go back on that now, ideally, right? So a participatory leader would have this huge advantage where they would say, you decided this, now you must follow through, right? Where the delegative leader would kind of find this difficult, this kind of a leadership or this governance would become very difficult. Here, I would like to talk about another ism or ideology, uh, liberalism. Yes.
So for laissez-faire, right, uh, or delegative leader, so the first one says allows people to make their own decisions. But is it like if we allow teammates to have their own decision, but still we need to have certain amount of governance, right? Because we cannot ask them to do whatever they want. Now,
Yes. That,
how to control that with this laissez-faire? Like, is it like, does this signify like we will have a little bit of governance, but still people will take their own decision and that will be reviewed by the leader and then that will be enforced? Is it something like that, or is it like we have to allow everyone to take their own decision?
yeah. So what you're saying is exactly what I'm trying to point out, that it becomes difficult as to when you put your foot down, when you let them be, right? Because if you follow this style of laissez-faire, control becomes very difficult. Control, which leads to output, becomes very difficult, right? So you can have a laissez-faire as long as your team is matured enough to come back, right? So I would say that one of the most organic or laissez-faire organizations could be where Google allows you to have your own, make your own decisions, come up with products that you or apps you want to create. They allow you to sleep at workplace. They give you food. You can come in anytime, complete your 8 hours, go anytime, wear what you want to wear. Nonetheless, someone who's been given that level of freedom needs to respect it, right? So for a Google employee, the love would be so high that, what if I leave Google and I go somewhere else and I don't get this atmosphere? How am I going to survive in any other organization? Right? So it's that Google type of environment, the system, everyone needs to be attuned to that. This culture doesn't come about very easily. Google is probably one example, and that to Google in US I'm talking about, not the one in India. So laissez-faire in India is slightly difficult to achieve, with moonlighting and all the other things happening. So laissez-faire in India would be slightly difficult, and when to put your foot down would be very confusing for a leader, I feel. Right. So I was talking about liberalism. Liberalism is one such idea of governance, actually, more than leadership. It's an idea of governance that came around at the time when Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher were in power. They brought in these ideas and they gave an illusion of liberalism. That's what a lot of critical thinkers would say. Mm. So, critical thinkers say that it just gives you an illusion that you're free to do what you want to do. Actually, it is capitalism in the guise of liberalism. You let the free hand of the market govern, right? And in this case, also at the end of it, you're allowing the capitalists to rule the roost in a way. Because again, if you're talking about free hand of the market, it's a very capitalistic system. That's the problem with laissez-faire system, right? It leaves out people who um, who don't have the means. So laissez-faire suits people, or liberalism or capitalism. These kind of systems, I'm sorry, I'm talking of liberalism and capitalism in the same breath, but for me, it is the same because the governance is very confusing over there. Uh, so this leaves people who are not attuned or trained for this kind of system. They get marginalized, right? So think of someone who's not trained to be in an environment like this. They might be very confused. They may not be productive for the first few months. By the time it's 1 year is over, they have not done anything productive and they might not get a good appraisal. They become bitter. So laissez-faire suits people who are experienced in this system, who have been given a tenured track that take your time. This is what you have to achieve in 1 year. And once you achieve this, this is your promotion that you'll get, or these are the benefits you'll get after 1 year. So these people are experienced in this particular kind of field, and the boss doesn't need to bother too much. Neither are the employees bothered too much of reporting all the time. So this leadership style is very one of the most trickiest style, right? So authoritarian we know is very straightforward, ideal type of style. Then there is participatory, which requires again a lot of maturity. It's the other end of the continuum, and in between somewhere is the laissez-faire style. Um, from there, we move on to the charismatic leader, as explained by um, Max Weber. He says these kind of leaders are the ones who are liked by the team, by the people around them. They lead because there is something very, a positive vibe or a good energy that these people spread around them. They bring about an eagerness and motivation in the people around them, right? And that their charisma is very infectious. It leaves an impression on the others, right? So charismatic leaders are leaders like in India, if you look at political leaders, the heads of mostly Congress party, such as Indira Gandhi, right? They are charismatic. For a long time, people kept saying that if Priyanka Gandhi comes into power, then Congress will do very well. Without knowing that what will she do, what will Congress do? We're not talking about the content. We're just talking of personality because she looks like Indira Gandhi. She needs to have one white streak of hair and she'll just start looking like her grandmother. So Congress will be very, successful. So this is charisma. It's difficult to explain and pinpoint what exactly it is, but it somehow engages people around, and it has a rub-off effect on people around you. That is charismatic leader, right? Uh, these people are generally liked by people around them. Others can try and emulate that style, and they may not be successful, right? So in today's times, I would say the current prime minister again has become charismatic over a period of time. There was a lot of bias against him earlier. Now there's a different kind of bias, but despite that bias, a lot of people are loving him. So that part you can call it as the being a charismatic leader. Then there's the facilitating leader, right? uh, a very wrong kind of name that we read about this leadership style is also called as servant leader. There is no servant leader. I don't subscribe to that idea of a servant leader. You can't be a servant and a leader. Those are oxymorons. So we call it the facilitating leader. Someone like the example of Mahatma Gandhi, probably. The highest priority of this leader is to encourage people, support them, enable them to fulfill the full potential and abilities, right? So these people would give an ideology, they would give a pathway, they would probably lead by example. If you want to follow it, you can. If you don't want to follow it, totally up to you, right? But if you follow it, they'll help you out. And whenever you're in trouble, they'll be standing behind you. That's a facilitating leader. A very practical way of understanding a facilitating leader is suppose I have an average boss who is sometimes authoritative, sometimes democratic, the usual. But this one person uh, is missing when I have a problem, when I want a sanction, when I want a leave, when I want them to tell me that I want to give 5% extra discount to my customer so that I can pick 50 lakhs of extra business from this client. And if they don't give me that sanction, they don't allow me to fulfill my targets, they don't motivate me when I need it the most. That upward communication is missing. We look at two-way communication, right? When the upward communication is missing, right, then you are the opposite of a facilitating leader. Then you're not liked. Then you can't say that, then an employee would say that you can't always tell me what to do without listening to what I am trying to tell you. I'm not going to listen to you next time if you don't listen to me, right? And that happens with people, and that is complacency. That happens over a period of time. Once they've worked in an organization, they've understood the systems, and they've pinpointed what is the fault with one particular leader. Those leaders who do not facilitate upward communication usually lose out authority, right? They are not considered good leaders. So facilitating, one has to be, whether you are overall a facilitating leader or not, but you need to facilitate when your team member asks you for a certain kind of a help, right? So these are the 5 basic types that we've discussed, which is autocratic, democratic, laissez-faire, charismatic, facilitating. I'll just play a little video here to explain these. Just give me a moment.
How do you explain when things don't go as we assume? Or better, how do you explain when others are able to achieve things that seem to defy all of the assumptions? For example, why is Apple so innovative? Year after year after year after year, they're more innovative than all their competition. And yet, they're just a computer company. They're just like everyone else. They have the same access to the same talent, the same agencies, the same consultants, the same media. Then why is it that they seem to have something different? Why is it that Martin Luther King led the civil rights movement? He wasn't the only man who suffered in a pre-civil rights America, and he certainly wasn't the only great orator of the day. Why him? And why is it that the Wright brothers were able to figure out controlled powered manned flight when there were certainly other teams who were better qualified, better funded, and they didn't achieve powered manned flight, and the Wright brothers beat them to it? There's something else at play here. About 3.5 years ago, I made a discovery. And this discovery profoundly changed my view on how I thought the world worked, and it even profoundly changed the way in which I operate in it. As it turns out, there's a pattern. As it turns out, all the great and inspiring leaders and organizations in the world, whether it's Apple or Martin Luther King or the Wright brothers, they all think, act, and communicate the exact same way, and it's the complete opposite to everyone else. All I did was codify it. And it's probably the world's simplest idea. I call it the golden circle. Why, how, what? This little idea explains why some organizations and some leaders are able to inspire where others aren't. Let me define the terms really quickly. Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do 100%. Some know how they do it, whether you call it your differentiating value proposition or your proprietary process or your USP. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why, I mean what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And why should anyone care? Well, as a result, the way we think, the way we act, the way we communicate is from the outside in. It's obvious. We go from the clearest thing to the fuzziest thing. But the inspired leaders and the inspired organizations, regardless of their size, regardless of their industry, all think, act, and communicate from the inside out. Let me give you an example. I use Apple because they're easy to understand and everybody gets it. If Apple were like everyone else, a marketing message from them might sound like this. We make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? Meh. And that's how most of us communicate. That's how most marketing is done, that's how most sales is done, and that's how most of us communicate interpersonally. We say what we do, we say how we're different or how we're better, and we expect some sort of behavior, a purchase, a vote, something like that. Here's our new law firm. We have the best lawyers with the biggest clients. We have, we always perform for our clients, do business with us. Here's our new car. It gets great gas mileage. It has, leather seats. Buy our car. But it's uninspiring. Here's how Apple actually communicates. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? Totally different, right? You're ready to buy a computer from me. All I did was reverse the order of the information. What it proves to us is that people don't buy what you do, people buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. This explains why every single person in this room is perfectly comfortable buying a computer from Apple. But we're also perfectly comfortable buying an MP3 player from Apple, or a phone from Apple, or a DVR from Apple. But as I said before, Apple's just a computer company. There's nothing that distinguishes them structurally from any of their competitors. Their competitors are all equally qualified to make all of these products. In fact, they tried. A few years ago, Gateway came out with flat-screen TVs. They're eminently qualified to make flat-screen TVs. They've been making flat-screen monitors for years. Nobody bought one.
98%
And Dell came out with MP3 players and PDAs. And they make great quality products, and they can make perfectly well-designed products, and nobody bought one. In fact, talking about it now, we can't even imagine buying an MP3 player from Dell. Why would you buy an MP3 player from a computer company? But we do it every day. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. The goal is not to do business with everybody who needs what you have. The goal is to do business with people who believe what you believe. Here's the best part. None of what I'm telling you is my opinion. It's all grounded in the tenets of biology, not psychology, biology. If you look at a cross-section of the human brain, looking from the top down, what you see is the human brain is actually broken into three major components that correlate perfectly with the golden circle. Our newest brain, our Homo sapien brain, our neocortex, corresponds with the what level. The neocortex is responsible for all of our rational and analytical thought and language. The middle two sections make up our limbic brains, and our limbic brains are responsible for all of our feelings, like trust and loyalty. It's also responsible for all human behavior, all decision-making, and it has no capacity for language. In other words, when we communicate from the outside in, yes, people can understand vast amounts of complicated information like features and benefits and facts and figures. It just doesn't drive behavior. When we communicate from the inside out, we're talking directly to the part of the brain that controls behavior, and then we allow people to rationalize it with the tangible things we say and do. This is where gut decisions come from. You know, sometimes you can give somebody all the facts and your figures, and you say, I know what all the facts and details say, but it just doesn't feel right. Why would we use that verb? It doesn't feel right. Because the part of the brain that controls decision-making doesn't control language. And the best we can muster up is, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. Or sometimes you say you're leading with your heart, or you're leading with your soul. Well, I hate to break it to you, those aren't other body parts controlling your behavior. It's all happening here in your limbic brain, the part of the brain that controls decision-making and not language. But if you don't know why you do what you do, and people respond to why you do what you do, then how will you ever get people to vote for you or buy something from you, or more importantly, be loyal and want to be a part of what it is that you do? Again, the goal is not just to sell people who need what you have. The goal is to sell to people who believe what you believe. The goal is not just to hire people who need a job. It's to hire people who believe what you believe. I always say that, you know, there's, if you hire people just because they can do a job, they'll work for your money. But if you hire people who believe what you believe, they work for you with blood and sweat and tears. And nowhere else is there a better example of this than with the Wright brothers. Most people don't know about Samuel Pierpont Langley. And back in the early 20th century, the pursuit of powered man flight was like the dot-com of the day. Everybody was trying it. And Samuel Pierpont Langley had what we assume to be the recipe for success. I mean, even now, when you ask people, why did your product or why did your company fail? And people always give you the same permutation of the same three things. Undercapitalized, the wrong people, bad market conditions. It's always the same three things. So let's explore that. Samuel Pierpont Langley was given $50,000 by the War Department to figure out this flying machine. Money was no problem. He held a seat at Harvard and worked at the Smithsonian and was extremely well connected. He knew all the big minds of the day. He hired the best minds money could find, and the market conditions were fantastic. The New York Times followed him around everywhere, and everyone was rooting for Langley. And how come we've never heard of Samuel Pierpont Langley? A few hundred miles away in Dayton, Ohio, Orville and Wilbur Wright. They had none of what we consider to be the recipe for success. They had no money. They paid for their dream with the proceeds from their bicycle shop. Not a single person on the Wright brothers' team had a college education, not even Orville or Wilbur. And the New York Times followed them around nowhere. The difference was Orville and Wilbur were driven by a cause, by a purpose, by a belief. They believed that if they could figure out this flying machine, it'll change the course of the world. Samuel Pierpont Langley was different. He wanted to be rich, and he wanted to be famous. He was in pursuit of the result. He was in pursuit of the riches. And lo and behold, look what happened. The people who believed in the Wright brothers' dream worked with them with blood and sweat and tears. The others just worked for the paycheck. And they tell stories of how every time the Wright brothers went out, they would have to take 5 sets of parts because that's how many times they would crash before they came in for supper.
This new
Hello.
And eventually, on December 17th, 1903, the Wright brothers took flight. And no one was there to even experience it. We found out about it a few days later. And further proof that Langley was motivated by the wrong thing, the day the Wright brothers took flight, he quit. He could have said, that's an amazing discovery, guys. Now I'll improve upon your technology. But he didn't. He wasn't first. He didn't get rich. He didn't get famous. So he quit. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And if you talk about what you believe, you will attract those who believe what you believe. Well, why is it important to attract those who believe what you believe? Something called the law of diffusion of innovation. And if you don't know the law, you definitely know the terminology. The first 2.5% of our population are our innovators. The next 13.5% of our population are our early adopters. The next 34% are your early majority, your late majority, and your laggards. The only reason these people buy touch-tone phones is because you can't buy rotary phones anymore. We all sit at various places at various times on the scale, but what the law of diffusion of innovation tells us is that if you want mass market success or mass market acceptance of an idea, you cannot have it until you achieve this tipping point between 15 and 18% market penetration, and then the system tips. And I love asking businesses, what's your conversion on new business? And they love to tell you, oh, it's about 10%, proudly. Well, you can trip over 10% of the customers. We all have about 10% who just get it. That's how we describe them, right? That's like that gut feeling, oh, they just get it. The problem is, how do you find the ones that just get it before you're doing business with them versus the ones who don't get it? So it's this here, this little gap, that you have to close, as Geoffrey Moore calls it, crossing the chasm. Because you see, the early majority will not try something until someone else has tried it first. And these guys, the innovators and the early adopters, they're comfortable making those gut decisions. They're more comfortable making those intuitive decisions that are driven by what they believe about the world and not just what product is available. These are the people who stood online for 6 hours to buy an iPhone when they first came out, when you could have just walked into the store the next week and bought one off the shelf. These are the people who spent $40,000 on flat screen TVs when they first came out, even though the technology was substandard. And by the way, they didn't do it because the technology was so great. They did it for themselves. It's because they wanted to be first. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And what you do simply proves what you believe. In fact, people will do the things that prove what they believe. The reason that person bought the iPhone in the first 6 hours, or stood in line for 6 hours, was because of what they believed about the world and how they wanted everybody to see them. They were first. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So let me give you a famous example, a famous failure and a famous success of the law of diffusion of innovation. First, the famous failure. It's a commercial example. As we said before a second ago, the recipe for success is money and the right people and the right marketing conditions, right? You should have success then. Look at TiVo. From the time TiVo came out about 8 or 9 years ago to this current day, they are the single highest quality product on the market. Hands down, there is no dispute. They were extremely well funded. Market conditions were fantastic. I mean, we use TiVo as a verb. I TiVo stuff on my piece of junk Time Warner DVR all the time. But TiVo is a commercial failure. They've never made money. And when they went IPO, their stock was at about $30 or $40 and then plummeted, and it's never traded above 10. In fact, I don't think it's even traded above 6, except for a couple of little spikes. Because you see, when TiVo launched their product, they told us all what they had. They said, we have a product that pauses live TV, skips commercials, rewinds live TV, and memorizes your viewing habits without you even asking. And the cynical majority said, we don't believe you, we don't need it, we don't like it, you're scaring us. What if they had said, if you're the kind of person who likes to have total control over every aspect of your life, boy, do we have a product for you. It pauses live TV, skips commercials, memorizes your viewing habits, etc., etc. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, and what you do simply serves as the proof of what you believe. Now let me give you a successful example of the law of diffusion of innovation. In the summer of 1963, 250,000 people showed up on the Mall in Washington to hear Dr. King speak. They sent out no invitations, and there was no website to check the date. How do you do that? Well, Dr. King wasn't the only man in America who was a great orator. He wasn't the only man in America who suffered in a pre-civil rights America. In fact, some of his ideas were bad, but he had a gift. He didn't go around telling people what needed to change in America. He went around and told people what he believed. I believe, I believe, I believe, he told people. And people who believed what he believed took his cause and they made it their own, and they told people. And some of those people created structures to get the word out to even more people. And lo and behold, 250,000 people showed up on the right day, on the right time to hear him speak. How many of them showed up for him? 0. They showed up for themselves. It's what they believed about America that got them to travel on a bus for 8 hours to stand in the sun in Washington in the middle of August. It's what they believed, and it wasn't about black versus white. 25% of the audience was white. Dr. King believed that there are 2 types of laws in this world, those that are made by a higher authority and those that are made by man. And not until all the laws that are made by man are consistent with the laws that are made by the higher authority will we live in a just world. It just so happens that the civil rights movement was the perfect thing to help him bring his cause to life. We followed him not for him, but for ourselves. And by the way, he gave the I have a dream speech, not the I have a plan speech. Listen to politicians now with their comprehensive 12-point plans. They're not inspiring anybody. Because there are leaders and there are those who lead. Leaders hold a position of power or authority, but those who lead inspire us. Whether they're individuals or organizations, we follow those who lead not because we have to, but because we want to. We follow those who lead not for them, but for ourselves. And it's those who start with why that have the ability to inspire those around them or find others who inspire them. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm sorry for all the commercials that kept coming in. It's a very popular video, so it has a lot of advertising, coming in and out. Uh, all right. So I think this was a nice way of putting into perspective all the leadership styles and putting a spin on it, which said that people follow leaders for themselves and not because a leader is a certain way or is a certain person, right? So we've covered here the styles of leadership. And if you were to be, a leader, what kind of leader would you be? Would you be one? Would you be a combination? I think there are, people combine leadership styles depending upon situations and on their own personality traits. So it's a mix and match of both. And we look at the theories of leadership to understand that point. I'll come to that. All right. So we have the leadership style theories, which we'll do after a 5-minute break. It's 1 hour complete. We have 1 more hour to go. Please take a 5-minute bio break. We'll start with the theories of leadership after this, and we'll take an example of data after that. So back to our PPT. We're discussing here the leadership styles. So defining leadership, it is the ability to influence a group towards the achievement of a vision or a set of goals. Now, what are we talking of here? We're basically talking of the post-corp function, right? Planning, organizing, staffing, directing, controlling, right? So under directing, we have four sub functions. One of them is leadership. So under direction, we have leadership, motivation, communication, supervision. They all go hand in hand to make it effective direction. And that direction should be unity of direction, direction towards goals of the organization, right? And in that, none of the leaders should behave in a way that I come or my idiosyncrasies are more important than the objectives of the organization. None of the leaders should behave like that. It is unity of direction towards the goals of the organization, not my personal likings or dislikings, right? That is why there is a subordination of personal interest over group interest or the organization's interest, right? So the vision and the goal should be very clear, and they come to us from unity of direction, unity of command, etc. All those 14 principles given by Henry Ford. And leadership becomes one of the functions performed under direction, right? Theories of leadership, behavioral, trait, and contingency theories. Trait theories of leadership. First, these are the theories that consider personality, social, physical, or intellectual traits to differentiate leaders from non-leaders. Leadership traits usually that have been defined under the trait theory are ambition and energy, the desire to lead, honesty and integrity, self-confidence, intelligence, self-monitoring, and job-relevant knowledge. Trait theories assume that people inherit certain qualities and traits that make them better suited to leadership. Also, trait theories often identify a particular personality or behavioral characteristic shared by leaders. For example, traits like extroversion, self-confidence, and courage are all traits that could potentially be linked with great leaders, right? They have risk-taking ability, they are very confident, all of that. We can see a lot of leaders who are very popular, we can see these traits in them. So trait means characteristic. If a particular trait or a key feature of leadership, then how do we explain people who possess those qualities but are not leaders? This question is one of the difficult ones in using trait theories to explain leadership. And of course, this becomes one of the criticism of the trait theory also. There are plenty of people who possess personality traits associated with leadership, yet many of these people never seek out positions of leadership. There are also people who lack some of the key traits often associated with effective leadership and yet excel at leadership groups. In that case, and of course, this is one of the critiques, but wherever there is an aberration to this rule or an opposite to the rule, there one has to understand that what is the leadership position? Where are we talking of leadership? So it could be even leading personal life decisions like a leader. They could be leaders in that, right? So one has to see what are we defining as a leadership situation, right? And that is usually we address that in situational leadership. We'll come to that. Limitations. No universal traits are found that can predict that leadership is leadership in all situations or the same leadership traits would work in all situations. And there is unclear evidence of a cause and effect relationship between leadership and the traits that have been mentioned here. Various studies prove that theory of leadership cannot hold good for all set of circumstances. The list of traits is not uniform, And different authors have also given different lists of the traits. Now, this could be cultural in nature, right? So different cultures could define leadership as being different. Also, within that, there could be different industries, different set of people you're dealing with. So, this is one of those things that um, it's inconclusive, I would say. Let's put it like that. There have been leaders who don't have these traits, but they are recognized as good leaders. So these are the critics, basic criticism of this trait theory, basically, right? So this is trait theory. From here, we move on to behavioral theory. Behavioral theories of leadership are based upon the belief that great leaders are made, not born, right? So trait theory assumes that you have certain qualities, you have them over a period of time, or you're born with them. Whereas behavioral says that you may not be born with it, but you can be molded. Or when we say that a person is an outcome of of their circumstances, right? So that is where behavioral theorists um, would peg their theories at. Rooted in behaviorism, this leadership theory focuses on the actions of leaders, not on mental qualities or internal states of mind. According to this theory, people can learn to become leaders through teaching and through observation also, right? So children who observe leaders or leadership qualities in adults around them, or when you are trained in an organization to become a leader. It's very difficult, but this kind of training is given by putting people in situations. Behavioral theories of leadership uh, are where they propose that you can change the behavior of people, right? From there, we move on to situational theories that propose leaders choose the best course of action based upon situational variables. Different styles of leadership may be more appropriate for certain types of decision making, right? So here, this could be kind of a combination of both. We've looked at the styles of leadership. We've looked at traits, right? Now, there is one strand which says that uh, you can be you can have any kind of traits, but or because you have the kind of traits, you are a certain kind of leader. That's one kind of thought. The other is that where situational leadership theories say that you can be a certain kind of a leader in one situation and very different in another by assessing the situation, by assessing whom you are dealing with, by assessing what is the objective of the activity that's being undertaken, right? For example, in a situation where the leader is the most knowledgeable and experienced member of a group, they might opt for an authoritarian style, right? In other instances where the group members are skilled experts, a democratic style would be more effective, right? So where you're hiring, let's say, consultants or domain experts, you would let them do what they're doing. Or even for brainstorming, when you hire experts, you allow them to do what they're doing. You allow auditors to do their due diligence, right? So all of that is where you become a participatory leader. This is Hershey Blanchard's situation in leadership theories. Uh, it talks of low and high supportive behavior and low and high directive behavior. When there is low supportive, low directive, it is delegating. Like I said earlier, here you will not know what level of governance you should, and when to step in and when not to. So this is the delegating type or the laissez-faire leader. It's low support, low direction. People are left on their own and let the free hand of the market, the demand and supply, determine how your team will behave, right? Then if you have high supportive and low directive behavior, it's a supporting leadership style. When you have a high directive and low supportive, it's a directing style, authoritarian style. And when you have both high, which is direction and support, this is called as the coaching behavior, right? So usually the participatory leaders, when they become facilitators, right? When participatory leaders behave as facilitators, they become coaches. They worked in the organization or similar industry for a very long time. Now, different organizations can hire them for that experience, or if they continue in the same organization, they become evangelists, quote unquote, evangelists for the business, for ideas. They just motivate by being there, right? They propagate ideologies, they talk of ideas, they support people. That is coaching. Here, there is high directive behavior and high supportive behavior. In this case, the development levels would be if it is, let's say, delegating behavior, you would nurture self reliant achievers who have high competence and high commitment. If it is supporting behavior, you would create capable but cautious performers who are high competence and variable commitment. When you have a directing leader, you have enthusiastic beginners with low competence and high commitment. That time you need to give them more direction. And a disillusioned leader would have some competence and low commitment when they're following a coaching leader, right? So laissez-faire could lead to a disillusioned leader. Then we have contingency theories as a subgroup under situational theories. Contingency theories of leadership focus on particular variables related to the environment that might determine which particular style of leadership is best suited for the situation. According to this theory, no leadership style is best in all situations. Leadership researchers White and Hodgson suggest that truly effective leadership is not just about qualities of the leader, it is about striking the right balance between behavior, needs, and context. Good leaders are able to assess the needs of their followers, take stock of the situation, and then adjust their behaviors accordingly. Success hence depends upon a number of variables, leadership style being just one of them. It also depends on the qualities of the followers and how conducive the situation is. From here, we move on to communication, which is another related concept to leadership. Before that, let's look at a little video on the leadership styles. Just give me a moment.
Kurt Lewin, the renowned psychologist and researcher, said it well. There's nothing so practical as a good theory. Well, how about 10 good theories? To improve your ability to lead, here are 10 of the best known leadership theories in 5 minutes. First are what was originally called the great man theory. It postulated that great leaders are born, not made. You either have it or you don't. And then it tried to identify the set of attributes that all of these natural born leaders have in common. While it's now become clear that leadership is actually learnable, there's indeed truth to the notion that some people inherently have more leadership gifts than others. So this was a good start. It spawned something called the trait theory of leadership, a line of research that examines which individual characteristics we should pursue to lead effectively. The upside is that it's easy to understand. Be like this and people will follow you. But the downside is that it's identified dozens of traits, and no single set has emerged as the ideal for all circumstances, so it can be overwhelming to attempt. Somewhat related is the skills theory of leadership. Just like trait theory, it tries to identify a set of key attributes, but in this case, practical skills rather than just general qualities of a leader. The bottom line on this one is if you want people to follow you, you need technical skills in your field. That is, you need to be good at what you're doing so you have some credibility. You need people skills like persuasion and diplomacy and affability, and you need conceptual skills, the ability to see the big picture and to think strategically. Next, there's a theory that leadership style is the key to success. Styles like be autocratic and demanding, or be democratic and participative, or be laissez-faire and leave people alone. Probably the best known style-based theory is called the managerial grid. Adopt a leadership style that's both people-friendly and uncompromising on performance. It's a solid foundation, but there's a bit more to leadership effectiveness. That's where these next couple theories came from. Situational leadership theory argues that there's no one-size-fits-all model. Certain traits and skills and styles fit better in one situation than another, so the leader must adapt. For example, coaching a high school boys team may imply a somewhat different approach than coaching high school girls. Same objectives and standards perhaps, but to get great results might require more of a disciplinarian for the boys, but a highly relational coach for the girls. A closely connected idea is called the contingency theory of leadership. Whereas the situational leadership approach assumes that the situation is static and the leader should adapt to it, the contingency theory assumes that the leader's default style is also pretty much fixed. Maybe he's more task-oriented than people-oriented. So the trick is to fit the right leader to the situation. Bottom line, effective leadership is contingent on matching the leader's style to the setting. In the coaching example, it would mean to find and install the right coach rather than hoping the current coach will adapt his or her style to the situation. Transactional leadership and transformational leadership are two theories that we can consider together. As the term implies, transactional leadership means that there's a reciprocity of behavior between the leader and the follower. People will follow based on the incentives in place. So the leader's job is to find the right mix of rewards and punishments, and then closely monitor what's going on. The theory of transformational leadership, by contrast, says that leaders gain buy-in and commitment not so much from the quid pro quo approach as they do from encouraging their followers, caring for them, inspiring them toward a vision. In short, they get results by proactively transforming the environment and the relationships, cultivating followership, rather than paying for it or punishing noncompliance like the transactional leader does. Leader-member exchange theory is a bit like transactional theory because it suggests that leadership is basically about a fair exchange between the leader and the led. But it goes further to say that the exchange creates an in-group and an out-group with respect to the leader. And that in turn affects people's performance and willingness to stick around. In a way, it's just like being back in high school. There was the in crowd, and then there were the rest of us, and that can have some dysfunctional consequences. So the theory suggests that leaders may want to address their tendency to alienate people. And then there's servant leadership theory, which is kind of a blend between transformational and transactional leadership. Boiled down to its essentials, it says that if a leader makes a priority of identifying and meeting followers' needs, serving rather than being served, that leader creates an environment of trust and cooperation and reciprocal service, and ultimately higher performance. It's been popularized in recent decades by many researchers, but it goes back a lot further than that. Much of Jesus' influence, for example, was and still is a result of compassion and service and sacrifice. People follow out of love and gratitude rather than out of compulsion or fear. Alright, that's 10 of the major theories in leadership, and there are important truths in each. The best
So from here, we move on to the next task that leaders need to perform. As a result of leadership, motivation should happen. And motivation happens through a very important function, which is communication, right? So I deliberately have not included motivation here because it will talk of Maslow's need hierarchy theory. That's one. Then there is the ERG model. I hope you know that. And then there is theory X and theory Y, right? So all of these are very basic theories. I'm sure you've covered them somewhere or the other. So I thought of bringing in points from communication, which is the style of communication of the leader that will determine how motivated the employees are, right? So the interactive two-way process of interpersonal communication, right, where you have exchange of ideas going from the sender to the receiver. Basically, you've seen the linear model of communication, right? So the sender encodes the intended message, the meaning, sends it to the receiver decodes it, and sends back a response or a feedback. In the process, there is disturbance in the channel of communication, which is known as noise. And our occupation, our main uh, our stress point, our pain points are regarding this barriers to communication, noise, not with communication, because more often than not, we know what is being communicated as the receivers of message. And as senders, we know what we're going to send. But there are still problems in communication, in receiving the message the way it was intended to be received. That is noise, right? That comes from language barriers, semantic barriers, right? More often than not, we say that, yeah, I know you want me to do this as your employee, but only if you had asked me nicely, I would have done it for you. Otherwise, I'm not going to do it, right? So it's language, the tone of the language, etc. Noise can also arise out of a lack of feedback. If to avoid conflict, I'm always saying yes to whatever message I'm receiving, yet I'm incapable of performing. I'm not giving proper feedback. And the person who's sending me the message, maybe the boss, the leader in this case, does not know where to stop or where to begin for that matter, right? So the absence of feedback can also create barriers to communication. And the third one is improper channels of communication, which means you do not employ a rich channel when it's required, right? So in this case, you could choose a channel which is improper, such as a lot of organizations today use WhatsApp as a formal means of communication. I remember shifting, for a bit. I'd gone for visiting assignment to another college from Symbiosis. Symbiosis, we know, don't ever use WhatsApp for formal communication. That's not an acceptable means. It's mails, email, right? But there's another college that I was visiting, and lo and behold, the first day itself, I'm made a part of like 10 WhatsApp groups. I'm being asked to join groups. I'm getting messages from different groups. And you realize how the style of working in this college is different from that of Symbiosis University, because here we have systems in place. Right? It's been there for a very long time. Systems have been created. We've learned those systems, right? But here was a college which did not have systems. It was being run by personalities, by the person who is in charge of one particular activity. Someone who's in charge of the fest is going on sending fest messages. Someone who's in charge of the timetable is going on sending random messages for class adjustments and this and that, you know? And that itself leads to stress and trauma amongst employees because you don't know what to prioritize. So WhatsApp is not a rich channel of communication, even though it's being used by a lot of organizations. It's a red flag. If there are multiple WhatsApp groups that uh, your organization is asking you to join, it's a red flag, right? So proper channels of communication should be adopted at the correct time. Please give me a moment, just a moment. So the proper channels of communication would vary from message to message, right? So if a general memo, regarding Friday dressing is to be passed, which is an informal, optional message, you know, if you put a little notice on a notice board or a poster on the notice board, good enough. People want to follow it, they can. They don't want to follow it, don't. There is a marathon, midnight marathon. If you want people to join it, okay. It doesn't have to go personally to a person, right? But when it is directed to one person, you need to be very particular about the richness of communication. If it's a one-on-one issue, it should be a phone call, a mail, and then a personal conversation. That is rich. So the richness of the communication channel depends upon situation, and that should be chosen properly by the leader who is passing information. If you are erratic as a leader in your communication, if you are not paying attention to how you communicate, in through which channel you communicate, you will not be taken seriously. You will be frustrated as a leader, and people will be confused. Your team is going to be confused. So, channel of communication is very, very important. Then there can be physical distractions when it comes to uh, passing the message. It could be uh, same WhatsApp message you sent and I've not received it, or I've not checked my messages. There are 100 messages because I'm a part of like 200 WhatsApp groups. I check my messages at 10 o'clock in the night, but something was due at 6 p.m. in the evening. I haven't checked it. It's a physical distraction. Or let's say we are having this conversation over a virtual meeting, and if my signal is bad, right, that's a physical distraction. Or the acoustics of the room in which I'm talking, it's making my voice echo. That's a physical distraction. There can be other kinds of physical distractions. Maybe your boss is too good looking and you're distracted by just looking at them. That could also be a physical distraction. Uh, then status effects. Status effects means the halo effect, right, of a person. Where beginning of my career and before I had joined Symbiosis, I was with ICFI. There's this one person in the team who'd been there for a very long time, and she would say that the director is like father. He's like my father. He's a father figure in the organization. They are not. Do not try to establish relationships at work. Pun intended as well, right? Do not do that. There is no father, no mother figure, or anything else for that matter. Work wife is a concept. It's bad. It's unethical, right? So do not engage in that. Do not create that halo effect around a person, because no one deserves to be put on that pedestal, because the moment they start falling from that pedestal, you will be disillusioned as an employee, right? So do not create halo. Now, halo comes from what we call as stereotyping, right? Stereotyping and cultural differences, the last point, they're kind of connected, right? So stereotyping is where you uh, well, stereotypes about, let's say, Chinese people, Chinese products. In India, if you look at it, stereotypes about South Indians, North Indians, Punjabis, mother tongue influence in the language, heavy accent, um, or not, or for a North Indian, not trying to understand that there are multiple different South Indian states and not all South Indians are the same. They're not homogenous. So these are the kind of stereotypes that we create for ourselves. Or else a stereotype about the way a person looks. They remind you of somebody whom you did not like earlier. And then you project those feelings onto this person, right? That is also stereotyping. So somewhere between cultural and stereotype, the outcome is status effects. And that distorts the communication process. So, as a leader, one has to be very rational not to let all of this happen. Moving on to the explanations. So the communication process uh, should be effective and efficient. And for that, uh, you must have richness of communication channel. You must have a clear message. Absence of feedback should not be there. You should avoid stereotyping effects. Then persuasion should, communication should lead to persuasion. The outcome of communication by a leader is usually seen as persuasion. A leader is effective only if they are able to make people behave in the way they wanted them to. That's the outcome, persuasion, right? How does this happen? When communication is done, it is done with an intention of changing attitude of a person. The attitudinal change leads to a behavioral change. The moment this happens, the moment change of attitude and hence the change in behavior happens, persuasion has taken place. Advertising does that to us, right? We see an ad, we form an attitude or change in attitude, and the result is purchase. Likewise, when a leader communicates, they should be able to form change or something should be done to the attitude of the employee, motivate them, which should result in a behavior, the intended behavior, right? So persuasion must be an outcome of effective leadership communication. So I've covered these points of poor choice of channels, poor written or oral expressions, failure to recognize non-verbal signals, physical distraction, status effects. So how can communication actually be improved? Of course, you need to take care of all of the barriers of communication. And a very important part of effective communication is active listening, not hearing, listening. The process of taking action to help someone, right, when they really need help, right? A facilitator behavior in leadership. Uh, so you are a facilitator leadership leader only if you're an active listener. And for effective listening, you should listen to the content of the message, listen to non-verbal cues, feelings, respond to those feelings, note all the verbal and non-verbal cues, and paraphrase and restate it to make sure that you've understood the situation clearly. Convey it back, get a yes or no, and then act on it. Right? So those are the rules of active listening. So with this, we've covered leadership styles. What is leadership? Theories of leadership, how leadership leads to motivation and persuasion through communication, right? So to end this, the class for today, I would like to discuss one of the business failures, which is Tata Nano, and the active leadership of Ratan Tata, and also we look at a success story, right? Just give me a moment. So we're looking at the strategies of Tata under the leadership of Ratan Tata. One of the problems that Tata faced was with Tata Motors, which is Tata Nano, right? Not being very successful. Um, Now, what happens is that the idea of Tata Nano, in hindsight, when we hear the story from Ratan Tata, he says that he saw this one Indian family once that was traveling on a bike, where it was the man riding the bike with the wife sitting at the back and children on the bike. Now, in India, uh, this is an economical way of traveling for a family. Whereas biking as such, anywhere else in the world, I mean, especially in the Western countries, the affluent countries, biking is seen as not just a mere means of transportation, it's seen as a hobby, an adventure sport, etc. Right? So when you're riding a bike, a helmet and a jacket, gloves, boots, that is understood. That's going to be a part of the gear that
Hello. Hello.
that's when they came up with the idea of Tata Nano. Yeah. So Tata Nano, the idea came up then, and it was a 1 lakh car. Give me a moment, please. So the idea of a 1 lakh car comes into picture because of this insight of Tata, of Ratan Tata. And they set up their factory in West Bengal, and then there is a problem and it's pushed out of West Bengal, and then it lands in Gujarat. Now, this has not been a success story for various reasons. I'm saying this out of personal experience that I've talked to people in Shela village where the Tata Nano factory has been set up. I don't know if I've shared this experience earlier in this class. Uh, but then the village where the land was bought by Tata Nano and Tata Motors, this village was marked by the Gujarat Industrial Development Corporation, GID. home. Then they promised that we will, if you're not happy with the land and if you don't want it, we'll give you employment in the Tata Nano factory. 2 people in the entire village were given employment, not inside the factory, but as guards at the gate of Tata Nano. The farmers were disillusioned and they were very unhappy. They were agitating. and a couple of them had already committed suicide in this village, right? So this was the situation of Tata Nano in Gujarat. It was already bad in Bengal. Now, the next problem is that when we saw the factory from a distance, we could see the plant, the capacity. It was uh, kind of an elevated place where I could see, I think, thousands of Tata Nano just parked up. They had been manufactured at the ideal capacity of the plant. These were unsold, right? So the next problem is that despite all these manufacturing labor problems, the other problem was that the Tata Nano car was not accepted. It's a huge failure in the Indian market till date. It doesn't sell. One, the positioning was wrong, right? It's a 1 lakh car. And if I'm driving myself, I'm driving a car, people know I've paid this one. I'm a cheapskate. People will think. The middle class of India doesn't want to be called middle class. That was the problem with the segmentation and positioning and targeting of Tata Nano. They had to reposition it as a trendy car meant for youngsters who are pooling the car and going to the college. Still, it didn't sell. Why? Because it was not safe. It was catching fire. It was hajar things were happening with it. So it remains a failure in the Indian market for various reasons, and there have been multiple obstacles with Tata Nano. Despite them having a car in every segment in India, Nano is a failure, right? Um, then the oldest segment of Tata, right? Here I'm talking of a success story, not per se with the product, but with the CSR, the CSR activity that was performed by Tata, right? And what is the CSR activity? This CSR activity has been performed for truck drivers of who drive mostly Tata trucks or even any other trucks, right? But then they know that their main audience, I mean, in a B2B segment is definitely truck drivers because logistics is the most disruptive market at the moment, business at the moment in India. So they have distributed condoms to these drivers. Why? Because most of these drivers, truck drivers, uh, are people who stay away from their families, etc., for a very long time. Right? They're on the road day and night for months together. So they engage in unprotected sex with multiple partners. It is assumed that truck drivers do that. Now, the CSR is effective because it is inclusive in nature. It doesn't put a taboo on multiple sex partners or unprotected sex, right? It is inclusive. This problem is there, right? What is the solution? Because people fall sick and they contact multiple infections and even HIV, right? So they decided to give these truck drivers free condoms. And the condoms are called Dipper, a word that resonates with the truck drivers. It is pun intended, use Dipper at night. This has been one of the most successful CSR strategies in India. It's penetrated very well with the segment, right? And the truck drivers themselves endorse this idea. Before this, the one successful campaign was by the National AIDS Control Organization, where it was, yeah, the onus of the use of condom was on the sex worker, not on the driver. So they had created characters, Balbir Pasha and Manjula. Balbir Pasha Manjula ke paas kyun jata hai? Was the question. And then, Manjula is safe and things like that. And she had the onus of giving him the condoms, right? So these are philosophically different. They understand, one campaign does not understand the audience at all. The other understands and positions and targets towards the audience very well, right? So this was the case study I wanted to discuss today. This is quite an elaborate PPT. It's about 55, 56 slides. I'll be sharing this with you. You'll get it through LMS very soon. There are a couple of videos that are marked in this. Please have a look at those. We have not covered all the videos. It's not possible within the given time span. So we've come to the end of today's session. If you have any questions, anything you want to say, you can do that. Any questions?
Ma'am, one more thing for Tata Nano, right? The reason for failure was also like they were not able to judge the market, I guess. It was because like this car was tagged as a what is it, middle class car,
The
and
class.
yeah, so the people never like even people who are also from middle class family, they were not they were reluctant to buy this. So that is also like
Exactly.
one of the reason. Yeah,
Yes, exactly. That's what I said, that the middle class doesn't want to be called middle class.
correct.
They don't want to be judged as middle class. And you put a tag on me that I'm driving a 1 lakh car. I don't want that. So the
Correct,
positioning
correct.
was totally wrong.
Yeah.
They did not understand the segment. Very true. It backfired. The very tagline backfired on them very badly.
Yeah,
But
correct.
we need to, when we study courses like this, we need to understand philosophically what was wrong with it, right? So we're discussing some failures and some successes. So after this, now we'll go into the pestle factors, the VUCA factors. So we'll start discussing conceptual issues of failures and successes. Right. From next session, we'll be doing all
For
that.
for Tata Nano, I guess if we go with a pestle, like we have that political factor, right? That also created some issue for Tata Nano, like
In
pushing
Bengal,
them
yeah.
out of Bengal, yeah, pushing them out of Bengal, and then going to Gujarat. That was also one of the reasons. If
Yes, it
not,
was.
yeah, yeah.
Multiple problems. Tata Nano had multiple problems.
Actually, they started facing the problem from beginning itself, so they were not able to cope up.
True, very true. And then, the quality of the product itself, and uh, they could not even
They had to
communicate that properly.
compromise. Correct, they had to compromise the product.
Product, yes, very true. All right, so we'll stop here.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.